Alors, bonsoir tout le monde. Bienvenue à cette réunion.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the meeting of the Standing Committee. That is to say, at this meeting, we come together to listen. We're always there to listen, but also to listen to our citizens and also groups of citizens and organizations who will deal with various topics with us. So the topics are up to you. And at this meeting, we do not make any decisions in any way, shape, or form. We are simply here to become informed, to learn, to know more about our community and our crowd, as we say amongst ourselves. So, without further ado, if you would like to come forward, the floor is yours. Great. Thanks, and very pleased to be here with you this evening. You have my presentation in front of you. That's great. So I'm very pleased to be here to accompany you in defining a strategy for development which will promote French language. We remember why we began this exercise. So for various reasons, we know that the city of Dieppe has been growing strongly, and it has changed the face of the linguistic diversity in which we have involved. And we have linguistic diversity. We are close to Anglophone English speaking cities who surround us, and we are going through a very strong population growth according to Statistics Canada. So these are the differences, and these are the items which have pushed us to look at this new strategy. And it's also important to remember that this strategy is consistent with the strategic planning that we're looking at for 2025-2029, which reaffirms and reinforces the Francophone identity and Acadian identity in Dieppe and all its diversity. The various objectives, so we were through this strategy, reinforcing the vitalization or the revitalization and the ensuring the long-term growth of French in Dieppe, affirming and promoting Acadian identity and developing dynamic strategies adapted to the city and its ecosystem. This work was undertaken in a very constructive way. That is to say, we mobilized various stakeholders throughout the area who are our partners in order to ensure that this strategy corresponds to your reality. Overall, we have led various consultations and we spoke with some 370 people. We had workshops with our team and stakeholders, various main companies. We did interviews with various partners and key people. A survey was also sent out to citizens to look at the vitality of various things and look at barriers to what we want to do. And there was a forum, and the French Fact was represented at this forum. Overall, we look at three pillars. One, the strategic diagnosis. Then we looked at the framework for intervention, which defined our visions, our main visions, and with the main pillars of our strategy. And finally, the action plan, which put everything together and made it more concrete. So we're going to be looking at the key elements of each of these areas. So with regard to the overall portrait of the situation, we wanted to remind you of some figures that relate to Francophonie in Dieppe. So these figures have played an important role and are key indicators. First of all, the number of residents who had French as a first language. So it's in 2001, it was at 77%, and compared to 2016, when it was at 73%. You can also see the percentage of the population who know both official languages. In 2001, it was 71%, and in 2001, it was 71%. So 78 compared to 71. And those who speak, who know French, so 86% in 2001, 77% now. The population statistics might be changing through other census data taken through Stats Canada. So these key observations have given us some key indicators. The use of French in the context. So we use French in many contexts. The perception of the vitality for residents who answered the survey and those who were stakeholders. And also, we looked at the vitality of the language. We looked at the barriers, linguistic barriers, concerns related to the future of French in Dieppe, and concepts of Acadie and Francophonie. Uh, they are separated with difficulty, and we're going to looking through all these various things. With regard to the usage, we notice that the picture has changed. French is mainly used by your circle, with your family, your friends, and at home. And we notice that the use of French is less present in this cultural and economic spheres according to the consultations and the survey that we did. With regard to the vitality of the French fact, it is perceived in a positive way by residents who answered the survey. So it's not necessarily possible to live in French in all the spheres that are in Dieppe, but it will be reinforced and much more valued. The city of Dieppe is an attractive city and dynamic for its francophone character. Many new residents have chosen Dieppe for its francophone identity, and so the French fact in Dieppe goes beyond local boundaries, but it has been raised with regard to linguistic barriers, which present a challenge to the French fact. So it's difficult to integrate, or some linguistic insecurity, which has been observed in the local population, which may limit the number of exchanges amongst the members of the community. With regard to the main consultations and challenges which were raised according to the vitality aspect, in a context where English is gaining more importance, there are some concerns emerging with regard to the continued existence of French in order to preserve our language we preserve it for linguistic and cultural means. The different consultations also revealed a deep attachment to the French language and your identity, the cultural identity and Acadian identity. These are important pillars, and important to take advantage of this, because the French fact is not just a language that we communicate with, it is also an anchor for our community. When we talk about these consultations, it was raised that these two concepts are undividable. They go together hand in hand. French is at the heart of Acadian culture, and it's a definition of its identity. Once again, this population is growing, and the Francophone population is evolving, and it is inclusive and diversified. It's important to ensure that the strategy we put into place be part of this transition as well in the coming years. Throughout all of the work that we've done, we have come up with a list of our assets and our challenges, and there are things to consider. I'm not going to be going through all of this. If you've had the opportunity to read this, then you have an idea of what's happening with regard to our assets. We are talking about leadership, which is affirming this collaborative ecosystem. All these stakeholders that we met with want to use this vitality strategy, and they are open to cooperation. And you can also see that there are many levers that can be used in order to promote this structure. Throughout all our consultations, we came up with strategic elements. The strategic element is something which defines our presentation, which are important to consider. So the first element is uh, the affirmation of municipal leadership. The city has really assumed its role as the place where Francophonie à Québec lives. Also, there's a holistic approach to ensure the vitality and we want to work and create a true environment which will promote the vitality of the French language, and it plays in many fields. It is very important to have a holistic approach. The third pillar is Acadie in a context of diversity and inclusion. What we mean is if we are talking about the environment which promotes the vitality of the French fac in Dieppe, we need to look at this and not forget that Acadie has an Acadian identity. Intersectorial collaboration means that the city of Dieppe cannot undertake all its challenges without establishing good partnerships, which we have through intersectorial collaboration, development of the economy at a local level, and attachment to one's language is also important as we promote development by way of entrepreneurship as well. And as I said, the attachment to one's language, this comes a little bit later. And it's important to look at French as not simply being a language of or a means of communication, but something that we live every day. All of this picture means that we have a strategic framework. This is at the heart of our strategy. The four orientations, there, so first of all, there's our vision. What can we expect? We have to mobilize our community to promote the many Francophone groups who add to the colors of Acadie. It will allow us to use four key orientations: the sustainability of our actions, French as the vector of cohesion and sharing, the tangible effect on residents, and collective undertakings. Together, you find a definition under each of these five pillars that objectives that you see on the screen, and we'll go through each and every one of them. So if we come back to the issue of the vision, mobilize our community to promote our multiple Francophone groups, which add to the colors of Acadie. This is important because we are looking at two important actions. So we want to mobilize our community and also promote it. We look at all of this strategy, and it really allows us to have and ensure cohesiveness with all the groups. With regard to the various orientations that come out of this orientation, the first orientation is French as a vector of cohesion and sharing. We create an environment which promotes the vitality of the French language, and we do it cohesively. And by talking with the diversity of language, we can ensure that we can use other languages that coexist together. The second one is collective engagement. We're talking about creating an environment which will promote things beyond the activities of the city to ensure that all key stakeholders are involved in this strategy. The sustainability of actions. Why? Well, because it's important for each of these actions go through the context and be consistent and will anchor by allowing us to adjust to all needs because the environment is moving ahead quite quickly. And the last component was the tangible effect on residents to ensure that the residents will truly feel the impact of the vitality of the French language and become cohesive as a result. In order to do this, we want to come up with a key pillar, which is to affirm and promote the French fact. What we are looking at through this first strategy is that the French fact must be more visible, that is, be perceived by the various residents, the various visitors in the public spaces and collective spaces. We want to make them see that they vibrate with this whole fact and feel a sense of belonging with the French. Various examples I'm putting forward with regard to define and implement a naming program which values the French and the Acadian fact in naming of streets and public spaces, cooperate in implementing a strategy to attract Francophone events like Jeux de l'Acadie, for example, with an adequate capacity to welcome these events that are some of the priorities of the city in order to ensure that we promote the French fact in Dieppe. So there are many indicators that have been put forward, the percentage of public spaces, the way that transportation lines are named as well. And to mobilize this, we need change actors. I have already said this several times. We need our partners who are also being involved in revitalizing the French fact. And so it, we want to develop strategic partnerships in education and other fields in order to ensure that the transition, the movement the wave that we're starting is a sustainable one. So here are different examples that we can find in the action plan to prepare a mobilization strategy and a intervention framework to promote adhesion and the implementation of the present plan, contribute to the emergence of places where sharing and exchanges can happen in order to bring together young people in the Francophone school sector as well as young students in immersion. And we are coming up with some suggested indicators, the number of partnerships with various Francophone cities neighboring us, the number of organizations who have a formal undertaking partnership. And after we have mobilized these actors of change, we're looking about the sustainability. It's important to sustain and promote the emergence of local initiatives. So through this strategy, we are looking at the role a city can play, and for us, it is to sustain the various linguistic and cultural initiatives. And so this is done at a community level in order to make sure that we will have an impact. And so through this type of activities, the implementation of networking events to share what we are doing well and promoting new projects, beginning by the business sector and bringing together various sectors in order to promote multi-sectoral cooperations. There are many indicators which are put forward, the number of local initiatives that are under support and total amounts invested or allocated to local initiatives. The fourth pillar talks about the capacity to influence others. Through this strategy, we want to create an environment which will promote the vitality of French and also to position the city as a leader, as in the francophonie, in at the Canadian, outside of Quebec or international levels, that it be through participation in forums and networks and other francophone groups. And some quick examples to create these partnerships and to value the status of being a francophone city. And also, there are some suggested indicators, the number of actions and representations by the city. The last component is to structure our structure to follow and assess the initiatives which are related to the revitalization of French. So increased mobilization with the municipal staff, better informed, better tool to integrate the vitality of French and its daily actions. Here again, you have the actions which can become a permanent resource, clearly mandated and given the proper tools for implementing the plan. So we're looking at the contribution of the municipal team. And finally, we have some various indicators involving the action plan. You have looked at the role that the city has to play in order to clarify their efforts. And we're thinking that the administration at the municipal level will perhaps play a greater and a more important role as a cooperator facilitator and to open more doors for us. And so this is really how we are going to do this and do this in the short and medium and long terms. In order to structure this, at the heart of this We are putting forward various recommendations to implement and the key factors to make sure that success happens. We looked at three things, which is operationalizing the strategy in which related to this capacity, making sure that the municipality can put forward its efforts and we have because the environment is changing so much to see if there are various actions that could be put forward. The second component, as I mentioned earlier, is at the present time, the situation might be worsened after the data from the last census come out. So this might have repercussions in the medium and long term. And so we can look at these things, what we were thinking about when this was happening, and also matching the various strategies for revitalizing the French language. It also touches the strategy and the planning, strategic planning as well, and also a healthy management of all of these expectations. You saw this, and we met with a lot of people through workshops and surveys, which has allowed us to identify some identity elements. These elements make Dieppe a municipality that can guide us and help us implement some of these various elements following these consultations. And following these consultations, what came out a lot of this is that the identity pillar has key values. This also came out in the tourism strategy. The Francophone identity is modern, inclusive, proud of its Acadian roots, a distinctive urban character. We can't forget our history, but recognize that Acadie and Francophonie in Dieppe is much more modern and it has to be inclusive and it can take into account all of these identities and is welcoming. It is because of this distinctive urban character that it brings together other municipalities, and we have a welcoming identity, and it's multifaceted. The other issues are more detailed in our strategy, but we met a lot of people who had all kinds of good ideas, and sometimes the city doesn't have the necessary levers to move ahead. But I want to remind you, in case there these levers that want to participate, we could defend these aspirations and be able to come up with some recommendations with the partnerships that we hope to manage to create an environment to put forward in aid of our citizens in the coming years. I would say that this concludes the presentation of the strategy. I know it's a lot of things that we went through, the diagnosis and the strategy. And so I wonder if you have any questions or any further requests for information. Thank you. Are there any questions by council members? Councillor Thibodeau. With regard to mother tongue, you said that 3.5% of the population who have two mother tongues. How can you do that? Yes, I took this from the Stats Canada data and how you account for this. Oh, these are from families who are from away. It's considered a mother tongue. This is the way it was titled in the census. This means that Stats Canada is looking at different statistics. Councillor Turgeon-Roy, thank you, Your Worship. This strategy and all these great ideas, I noticed that when I was reading this, I said, there are a lot of things that we're doing already. And I think that the observation I have after reading all of this, and when I look at the action plan, it's really to go and look for partners, people who uh, subscribe to this strategy and who become our allies in all the actions that we are hoping to put forward to promote the francophonie. And we have the immigration strategy we're going to be having in a moment. There are all kinds of ways of working together. But I think the most important thing, what I take away from this, is that we need people who cooperate with us, who will support us in our action plan, be it in various initiatives that you suggested for festivals. There will We're going to look for tourneys and championships that can come to us. We already have a francophone environment here, but we are looking for allies to can help us promote this strategy. But I want to reassure all of us by saying that we are doing many of these things already. Thank you. It was good. It was very illuminating. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor.
Voilà.
Merci, Monsieur le maire.
Thank you, Worship. Firstly, thank you. I remember the first discussions that we held looking at the results of the various latest census, where we looked at the reality of what the figures were telling us. And so we asked ourselves how we are going to address this. So firstly, thank you to all the employees who found the resources to help us. Congratulations for this undertaking. We have participated at different ways and different times in the consultations that you held, and it was a fairly widespread consultation. So thank you for this report. I share the comments that Councillor Turgeois has put forward to say that the partnerships idea seems to be one of the solutions, but also what I like in this plan and what I'm seeing is that it gives us a way and a reason of becoming mobilized in a more specific way. It also allows us, at least in my opinion, you know, I have ideas for various actions, but we don't know how to anchor them in. What I've seen in what you've given us is the way to anchor these ideas. It has to be strategic, it has to be logical, and that increases our chances for success and in order to obtain the results. So thank you, because quite honestly, a couple of years ago, or even 18 months ago, I was wondering what kind of tool I was going to need to orient my ideas that it would be constructive and useful. And in this plan here, we have ways of doing things in order to anchor ideas. To those of us in council, we look at solutions, we look at ways of doing things. We can't always anchor those ideas in. And so that's why I think that this is a great plan that you have put forward. So thank you for this. Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing no others. So thank you for this presentation. It's a topic which is very close to our hearts. Here in Dieppe, and a francophone city which continues to grow with all the good things and all the less good things. So we can't choose who comes to live here, but we're ready to work with everyone in order to improve our situation and also to have this, this dates back for many years now. I think we've succeeded in slowing down this thing, but we still have a great deal of road ahead of us in order to make sure that our francophonie will be living and growing for a long time to come. Thank you.
Next presentation, immigration strategy.
Alors, bonsoir tout le monde.
Bonsoir.
Good evening, everyone. All right, could you please identify yourself? Not everybody knows who you are, so my name is Nancy Gay. I'm a consultant with Spark Strategy. So I'm very happy to be here with you this evening to present the immigration strategy for the city of Dieppe. And I will be alternating with my colleague, and we'll each be presenting a different part of the strategy. So before we get into the presentation officially, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the process that we took to develop this strategy. The City of Dieppe Immigration Department began this process to equip itself with a revised immigration strategy for 2026-23, or 2030 rather. This process is one of the priority projects in Dieppe's new municipal strategic plan. So the objectives of the initiative are to promote the inclusion and harmonious integration of newcomers and the creation of an environment that respects diversity. Second objective, encourage the participation of local community members and newcomers. So this is not a strategy that was done in isolation. There was a lot of collaboration, consultation of the community. And then the last objective was to contribute to strengthening the vitality of the French language and Acadian culture. As we saw with the previous presentation, this is an important aspect, and in Dieppe and its local economy. So that's basically what the objectives were. So what we're going to be talking to you about tonight is the strategy contains a lot of contents. So we're going to present the introduction to you. We're going to tell you about the process and the approach. But there's a big part of the strategy as well that deals with the current state of immigration in Dieppe and the region. And tonight we won't really be going into that. So that information is in the strategy, but we won't be going over it. And the challenges and issues related to immigration are also well documented. But tonight we'll be looking at the key findings, the statistics and the diagnosis that was done. And then we'll look at some of the priorities for 2026-2030. So we'll be looking at the areas of focus and the strategic objectives, what we're really going after with this new strategy. And there's an action plan that comes with the strategy. We won't be going into that either tonight, but we will be taking, we'll go up to that point. So I'm going to invite my colleague to talk to us about the immigration process itself. Ariella Orbach, I'm a senior consultant with my company. So we really wanted to start with the immigration process. We wanted to focus on the experience, the lived experience of immigrants. And that guided the way we organized information in the strategy. So what you see here is the typical pathway. There are 4 stages for someone who wants to immigrate to Canada. So the first step, of course, is attracting immigrants. So bringing people to Dieppe. And then the second step is welcoming newcomers. Third step is integrating and including these people in the host community. And then the final, but not least, step is retaining immigrants, keeping them here. So we use that pathway to organize our analysis of the challenges related to immigration. And we also used it to guide the organization of information in the strategy itself. So our key findings, based on all the consultations that we held, both in the community and internally with staff. So we looked at the strategies and we isolated key findings for each step. So in terms of attracting immigrants, so on one side we see that the city is highly attractive, thanks in part to its distinctive Dieppe character and its living environment, which makes it a popular destination for immigrant families. On the other hand, we see that the reality experienced by immigrants in Dieppe is sometimes different from the expectations created during the process of attracting newcomers. And that represents the main challenge at this stage of the immigration journey. In terms of welcoming newcomers, we see that reception capacity is a major challenge, due in part to many structural elements, such as the housing shortage, pressure on services, different types of services, so like schools, the municipal services, health services, and language services as well. And there's also a certain difficulty accessing information and services in a complex system. So those are the challenges that newcomers who come to Dieppe face. In terms of integration and inclusion in the host community, now we're all aware that there's rapid population growth in the city, and there are a large number of immigrants arriving in recent years, and this has contributed to diversifying the city's population. But there are opportunities for intercultural encounters between immigrants and Dieppe residents, and particularly those from the Acadian community. And these opportunities are an important lever for promoting coexistence and mutual understanding. And then keeping our immigrants, or retention of immigrants, access to employment is a major challenge for immigrant retention, particularly due to language barriers, recognition of prior learning, and the mismatch between people's qualifications and available jobs here. The language barrier and the need to use English contribute to a low retention rate among French-speaking immigrants who do not speak English. So we talked about the mismatch of expectations and the reality when people get here. And this is something that we saw in statistics as well, that although the retention rate has improved in recent years, the retention of Francophone immigrants remains an important priority for the future strategy.
Alors, je vais poursuivre avec...
All right, I'm going to continue with the areas of focus. And so what you see here, I mean, the writing is quite small. It is based on the pathway of immigration, as Ariella pointed out. So the first area of focus is attraction. So a destination of choice in the French. And what do we mean by that? Is we want Dieppe to help people prepare to immigrate. So even before these people leave, even before they leave, people choose Dieppe as a destination. We want people to have clear information so that they know where they're going. So we need to start right at when people are considering immigrating. We have to be able to sell Dieppe as a destination of choice. The second area is we want to create an open and favorable environment. So Dieppe is a community that promotes coexistence and encourages openness. And so it's not just about what the immigrants have to do, but the community also has to understand what's going on and better understand the reality of people and the experience of people coming here. So it's a two-way street, or two-way communication, if you will. So it's not just the community, the host community, or the immigrant that has to work. Both have to work together. And then the third focus area is integration and retention. And yes, statistics have improved in recent years, but there is still a substantial amount of effort that has to be made to keep these people here. So we want Dieppe to become a place that's conducive to putting down roots. We want people that, there are people who come here and they don't succeed in setting down roots, but we want Dieppe to be a place that generates multiple opportunities and avenues for fulfillment for newcomers. And that means a job, basically. We want people to be able to contribute fully to the city's prosperity and the region's economic development. So this area will include actions aimed at helping people find work. To the left, you have a transversal or a cross axis, if you will, and it's about inclusion. We want Dieppe to be a space for continuous dialogue. Now, what does that mean? It means that the city recognizes or is committed to promoting inclusion, citizen participation, and intercultural dialogue at every stage of the welcome and integration process. So before these people come to Dieppe, it covers that stage, but also when people get here and they start integrating into the community, we want their that's where this area of focus that's what this area of focus is about. Now that brings us to the strategic objectives now. For each area of focus, there are objectives that have been identified. And underneath each objective, there are actions. So there are 9 main strategic objectives. So when we're talking about attraction, it's about helping people prepare for their arrival in Dieppe by supporting the dissemination of information that promotes understanding of the local environment and job market. We want people to know what the economic reality of Dieppe, the place that they're coming to, is, especially in cases where with immigrants that speak only French. The second objective is to raise awareness among residents and employers about cultural diversity and welcoming new residents. We want the host community to be sensitive to the idea that, you know, sometimes there's only people only speak French. Sometimes they speak 2 languages, but not French. So create awareness among the residents and employers of these people. So we're preparing people and immigrants, everybody that's involved in the immigration process. And then we come to the next focus, which is on welcoming. So collaborating with partners to improve access to resources and services, including strengthening the welcome capacity of the Francophone community. This was said earlier. There are various services, schools, healthcare, education. There's a certain amount of work that can be done here to improve access to those services for people who arrive. The second objective is to strengthen the municipal organization's capacity to adapt to the needs of immigrant populations and other diverse groups. Again, it's about preparing the municipality, people that are on the municipal team. We want to help them better understand immigrants. The 5th objective is to support immigrants in navigating municipal services and bylaws and regulations. Not all of us work in immigration, so it's not always easy easy for people to understand municipal rules and bylaws. So it's important to support people who don't necessarily know these rules or this system. So that's one of the objectives. The 6th objective is to create spaces for connection, sharing, and awareness between the local population and people from diverse cultural and immigrant backgrounds. It's important to have spaces and times for sharing where people speak to one another. So people who are already here, so that they can talk to people who are arriving. So there are activities that we can organize that foster that type of communication. The next key focus is integration and retention. So there are 3 objectives here. One is to promote access to employment for people with immigrant backgrounds by raising awareness and supporting the business and education communities. So again, it's a 2-way street. Employers have to understand the reality of immigrants. And so there needs to be awareness raising. The eighth objective is to work with economic development partners to strengthen support for immigrants with entrepreneurial projects. So it's not just about creating jobs, but it's also about encouraging the people with an entrepreneurial spirit to start businesses here in Dieppe. And then the last objectives, and it's hard to see on the screen here, but it's encouraging people who are already settled to share their experiences with those who wish to settle in Dieppe. So it's basically coming full circle. It's about saying that, okay, once somebody has successfully integrated into Dieppe, if they can share their experience with people who are thinking about immigration, that brings us back to the first area of focus. So that's it for the strategy itself. Are there any questions from members of council? Councillor Thibodeau. Thank you, Your Worship. Well, both of you seem to have consulted each other because both your strategies are kind of rowing in the same direction, if you will. You know, we're lucky to have CAFI here in Dieppe to help us with immigration. So I just wanted to make that comment. I don't have any questions. Well, I want to reassure you that there were very valuable people on both our committees who had to say, okay, these two strategies have to speak to one another. Yes. All right. Thank you. Councillor Jeannet, please. Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you very much for the presentation. It's very interesting. And yes, both strategies are well aligned. It's great to see. My question is, you know, when I was listening to you speak, it kind of it helped me to, it put me in a space where I tried to imagine the pathway of an immigrant and what they experience.
De l'intégration, mais
you know, you've talked about the different aspects of integration, but in terms of taking root, somebody who immigrates here will never forget their roots, and sometimes it takes time to feel settled in your new community. How much time on average does it take for people to feel like they're part of the community? I was just wondering about that. I imagine it depends, you know, on the person and their personality. But maybe there are other factors that we could look at. Somebody might have been able to find a job, but once they're settled and they have a job, maybe there are other things that make a person say, you know what, no, I don't feel at home here yet. I don't know if there's a specific time. I think you said it well. Every person is unique. But in the action plan, there are initiatives that might be able to address that factor of rooting, becoming rooting. Getting involved, for example, in various groups, municipal, city council, committees. I think that might be an indicator that shows that somebody has been successful in their integration. When they start getting involved, doing volunteer work, getting involved on boards, I think that's where we can see it, I think. But all right, Councillor Turgeon-Roy, please. No, that's okay for me. I'll pass. Councillor Godbout. Thank you. It's an excellent strategy. In the last few weeks, we've had lots of presentations on immigration, Francophone immigration. I think we see the benefits of it. There were challenges in the past that we may not have had the energy to address. But what I like in this strategy is that we're taking the pulse, an accurate pulse of the community. We have to work on employment, for example. For a number of Francophones, and I didn't realize this, I should have maybe, but often Francophone immigrants French is not their first language, and sometimes it's their second or third language. It made me think of another presentation that we had earlier in the week. What does it mean to be Acadian? How do we define ourselves? How do we find ourselves a place in that culture? But within the Acadian community, there are various distinctions. Bréon and the Bréons didn't identify earlier as Acadians. They identified themselves as friends of the Acadians. We have our own identity. We may not want to lose that. But as long as these people feel that they're friends of Acadians, I think that's another maybe strategy that we could look at. We have to help people. We have to find a way so that people feel included, even if it's just feeling like they're at a friend rather than becoming Acadian. But thank you for the suggestions that you give here, for the concrete examples and concrete ideas. Councillor Jojo, I changed my mind. I have something to say now. As you know, we did do a lot of consultation, or we did do consultations. And we talked a lot about integrating immigrants into the workplace. But in the different areas of focus, I see it in the area in retention and attraction. Welcoming, in the welcoming area of focus, I think that something is lacking. We need more. We've mentioned this often, when we talked about employment. It's important for newcomers to have a job. It's really a crucial element. But I think in terms of welcoming, there's something missing, but maybe it's just the way it's worded. We talk about awareness raising, local population, but maybe we could talk about job market more. I don't know. Yeah, maybe before these people get here, we're promoting a lot of things, but maybe we have to specify, we have to do more work with the local job market, just so that we don't forget these people, that we provide them with support. All right, I don't see any other questions. All right, thank you very much for your presentation. And we will continue doing what we have to do at our end. And sometimes it means different things for different people, but we will continue doing our work. All right, have a nice evening. Next presentation. This one deals with the development charges policy framework. Mr. Cormier is going to do a little bit of an introduction before someone else gives a presentation. Boy, I really know how to empty a room. Everybody left.
Présentation à propos des redevances d'aménagement.
So this is a presentation on development charges. Basically, it's a way of recouping costs for certain capital projects. The presentation is going to be done by Watson and Associates Economists Limited. This is a Canadian firm that an expert in this field. They do presentations all across the country and so they're the authority. They're here to support us, and tonight we'll be just talking about the policy framework, what's being proposed, and then eventually there will be a bylaw that will deal with these development charges. But Daryl Abbs will be making the presentation tonight. He will be talking about the methodology, the next steps, and then there will be questions. So I just want to confirm with you that there is a document that's underway, but tonight we just wanted to give you a bit of context before sharing the document. And that document will be available in December, and then we'll be asking you for your feedback on it. So now I'll hand the mic over to Daryl, and this will be an English language presentation, but there will be part of it in French as well. Daryl.
Good evening to the chair and members of the committee. I know Mark, I'm going to be controlling the presentation.
Daryl, can you see the presentation on Teams?
Yeah.
Je vois un tas de personnes s'affairer là. I see a few people moving around, hopefully in the right direction.
Well, perhaps while that's being worked out, I'll just introduce myself. My name is Daryl Abbs. I'm a managing partner with Watson & Associates Economists Limited. Our firm undertakes development charges, analysis studies for municipalities across the country. And so we're working in BC, working in Ontario, and we've worked with the City of Moncton and a couple other municipalities in New Brunswick to implement development charges.
You're on your own.
I can hold up. I think. If you wanted to work out the presentation, go to the next item, I can wait. That's okay.
Huh? Okay, c'est ça. We have the presentation on our iPad, so we can move it right along.
Sure. I can do that too.
All right.
Okay. So if we go to the agenda slide one. What we'll talk about is just a brief overview of development charges, what they are, and why municipalities would consider them. We'll talk a little bit about the principles framework, what can be included in the framework. And then we could talk about what's potentially going to be into the principles framework that you'll see subsequent to this meeting. And then summarize some of the consultation feedback we heard from the development stakeholders that we met with in September. And then lastly, we'll wrap up with some next steps in the process. So if we go to the next slide, and then the subsequent slide after that, which is titled Revenue Tools. So municipalities in New Brunswick and generally across the country, there we go, have a few revenue tools at their disposal to fund growth-related infrastructure. And so typically what we've seen...
Mr. Abs, this is Mark Melanson, and we have a technical problem here, so we're not sure if anybody from, we don't hear you too much here in the room, and I don't know about the web, if people can hear your presentation, so let's wait a minute or two. Our technical people are looking at it. Sorry to cut you just like that, but we want to make sure to listen and be able to understand what you're presenting.
Not a problem.
Alors, Soumaya, est-ce que tu veux qu'on prenne une pause?
Sumaya, do you want us to take a break? Your worship, maybe we could take a 5-minute break.
On va prendre une pause de 10.
Let's take a 10-minute break.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Alors, bonsoir.
Good evening again. Sorry for that little delay. And let's move on to which is the Young Politicians of Canada, New Brunswick chapter. Please come forward. Do you have a presentation? Yes. We just want to make sure. Number 4, presentation 4.
Merci. Bonsoir, Monsieur le maire.
Bonsoir, bienvenue.
Chers membres du conseil, mesdames et messieurs. Merci sincèrement de nous recevoir.
Thank you for receiving us. It's a very big honor for us to be here tonight. And it was following an exchange with Mr. Thibodeau that I was able to assemble my team and prepare this presentation. My name is Anel Kana. I am the Dieppe representative for this organization. Beside me is, and the interpreter missed the name, he represents the city of Fredericton. Tonight, we will be co-presenting this presentation. So some of the slides will be in French. Austin will be speaking English, and this represents the official bilingualism of our province. So to begin with, this organization is a non-profit organization. It's apolitical. It is present in every Canadian province, and our mission is to mobilize, educate, and empower young people in New Brunswick to take an active role in political and civic life. So I will be talking a little bit about who we are, our mission, and our vision. So Young Politicians of Canada, the New Brunswick chapter, is a non-profit, non-partisan organization, and it's fully volunteer. And its objective is simple, is to initiate young people to political and civic life. We serve as a bridge between youth and municipal institution, offering an opportunity for young people to develop their leadership skills. And our role is to allow young New Brunswickers to better understand our institutions, to take their places, and to contribute actively to the development of their communities. Our mission is clear: to give young people the tools, the resources, and the opportunities that they need to actively participate in civic and political life. We want to cultivate a generation of engaged, informed, and empowered young people where every person, regardless of where they come from, can get involved, they can propose ideas, and become actors of change in their surroundings. Our vision is to cultivate a generation of engaged, informed, and empowered young people who will lead with integrity, knowledge, and a deep sense of public service and an understanding of the political issues. We think that this is important to build a stronger, more inclusive, and more representative community. Now, why does this matter for the city of Dieppe and for New Brunswick as well? Many young people feel disconnected from politics nowadays, and that includes municipal decisions that affect their daily lives. There's transportation, urban planning, recreation, inclusion, and community services. So our role is to build a bridge and to show young people that they can contribute to local decisions. Through our chapter, we want to create a link or a bridge between young people and local institutions so that young people feel more involved, consulted, and represented. Now, the benefits for Dieppe, our chapter represents a strategic opportunity for strengthening youth civic engagement. More young people are become informed, participate, and get involved in municipal affairs, the better it is. And it also helps to position Dieppe as a pioneer, and it helps to prepare the next generation of local politicians. The young people being trained today are the city councillors, the mayors, and the community leaders of tomorrow. Dieppe is a young city, it's dynamic, it's multicultural, but together we can promote youth engagement. I'm going to hand the mic over to my colleague Austin now.
Objectives focus on creating a structured pathway for youth engagement across the province. In the short term, we aim to build a visible presence, connect with schools and universities, and run introductory civic workshops. In the long term, our goal is to create membership programs, annual conferences, and a strong provincial network of active young volunteers. Together, these objectives help create New Brunswick youth with the knowledge, confidence, and leadership skills needed to participate meaningfully in municipal affairs. Our credibility comes from the strong foundation we've already built from the other chapters of the YPC. We are actively engaging with multiple municipalities across New Brunswick. We've been welcomed by the Premier and supported by MLAs and senators who recognize the importance of empowering youth. Most importantly, we follow a structured plan already built upon and enacted in several other chapters across Canada, including mentorship, training, and civic education that ensures every initiative we deliver is meaningful, organized, and impactful for our communities. Here are some examples of what we can offer across the province. Municipal council simulations based on official procedures, which allow youth to step into the roles of mayor, councillors, and citizens. Educational workshops in schools and universities, visits to the Legislative Assembly, district tours, where youth meet mayors and councils, and youth surveys that highlight the priorities and concerns of young people. These initiatives help young citizens understand how government works and how they can be a part of it. Every district representative commits to volunteering in their municipality, engaging youth in leading local civic activities. These actions create measurable impact, such as more youth participation, stronger connections between young citizens and institutions, and a growing culture of leadership and civic engagement. Ultimately, this work helps build communities that are more inclusive, informed, and future-focused. Back to Anaël.
Merci. Ce que nous demandons aujourd'hui est
So what we're
simple,
asking for is very simple, and it's in line with what the role of the city. So we ask for official support from City Council through the adoption of a resolution of support. We ask for access to the council chamber to organize youth simulations and training activities. We're asking for a visibility partnership in the city. And finally, we're asking for financial and logistical support. So with those tools, we can offer young people in Dieppe and throughout the province concrete opportunities that are organized and accessible. Investing in youth engagement today means training the civic leaders of tomorrow. And following our conversations with young people and a number of local officials, we have identified a number of complementary initiatives. So that's why we also would like to propose establishing so we would like to work with the municipality. So concretely, what does that mean? It means identifying school partners, creating continuing education content, and our objective is simple: maximize the impact for young people while ensuring we're ensuring that we're in line with the city's priorities. We also work with provincial and federal counterparts as well. Jeanette Petitpas-Taylor, for example. And these collaborations allow us to teach young people how government operates. Our goal is to create synergies and to create a space where young people can contribute. In conclusion, Dieppe has an opportunity to become a pioneer in youth civic engagement by supporting our organization. We believe strongly that when young people are equipped, supported, and engaged, they contribute to building a stronger, more participatory community. We want to build a more participative, stronger, and inclusive society. Thank you very much for your attention, and we are now able to take your questions. Thank you. Any comments or questions from Council? Councillor Thibodeau, please. Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for the presentation. That allows us to get to know your organization better. I didn't know, even though I had discussions with you, I didn't really know much about your organization. So thank you for that. I do have a question. How many members do you have from Dieppe in your organization? That's a very good question. We have 30 members from Dieppe right now. We have a WhatsApp group with 230 members throughout New Brunswick, Shediac, Moncton, Edmundston, and St. John. And where do you recruit your members? In high schools? Yes, high schools and at the universities, in universities and community colleges as well. All right, that's all for me. Thank you. Councillor Lanteng. Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for the presentation. It was very interesting. Thank you for getting involved in municipal politics. We will need young people to replace us because we're starting to get old. I'm speaking for myself, of course. Now, I didn't know your organization either, so I'm just curious. You're the New Brunswick chapter, so there's one chapter per province. Is that how it works? Yes. Is there like a federal board or a national board that oversees all those organizations? Yes, there is. And yes, we have chapters in every province, and each province has its own board of directors. So our chapter our organization is based in Fredericton. There are 6 members of the executive committee, and we have representatives in each city. We have 7 representatives. So Dieppe, myself, Moncton, Shediac, Fredericton, St. John's, and St. Andrews as well. And the national board is where? Is Ottawa? Yes, it is. Yeah, Ottawa. Okay, my last question. Since this is something I wasn't really aware of, has this group been around for a long time? We've been around for 4 years, approximately. Okay, so it's quite a new organization. Yes, it is. All right, thank you very much, and good luck. Councillor Godbout. Thank you, Your Worship. Well, first of all, congratulations. Congratulations for the initiative. As a young person, many, many years ago, I was a president of the Conseil de Jeunesse, and it's a great way to get people to introduce young people to the organization. And I like the fact that you're nonpartisan. I find that interesting because there are not a lot of opportunities for young people to get involved. Most young people will join a political party. So so I found this interesting that you're non-partisan. Have you had discussions with the Union of Municipalities of New Brunswick? Have you tried to make connections with them? We haven't had a chance to make a presentation to them yet, but that's coming. Okay, excellent. I'm glad to hear that. That's a natural link, if you will, natural connection to have. Thank you for your the presentation, and I can encourage you to continue. Councillor Brideau. Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for the presentation. It was really interesting. We have met a number of times already, but I was excited to hear what you had to say. Here's what I'm curious about. When you approach young people, or when you recruit young people who are interested in politics, what do they tell you? What are they telling you? Not all young people are interested in politics, but when they see, so I suppose that you approach them when you recruit them. What are they curious about? Why would they want to get involved in politics? That's a very good question. I would say that when we approach young people, here's what we say. Does politics interest you? Would you like to be more involved in your municipality or in the political life? Would you like to have an impact in your community? And a lot of people say yes, they want to represent their city. They want their voice to be heard. So there are a number of young people who are interested just by that aspect. And then they contact us. All right, thank you. And I wish you a lot of success and with your new organization. Councillor Janet. Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for your presentation. Very interesting. It's something that I would have liked to have when I was younger. So if there are young people listening to our meeting tonight, how do they contact you? How do they reach you? So if young people are listening to this program tonight, it's being broadcast, how do they go about connecting or contacting you, and how do they go about participating in your activities? Okay, very good question. We have a LinkedIn page, so people can, so we have a LinkedIn page. People can just type Young Politicians of Canada, New Brunswick chapter, and they'll find us. We also have a website with, so if they're youth from New Brunswick, they can join us directly, they can join us. And if they're from another province, they can find information on where they can connect in their own province as well. Thank you. All right. I don't see any other questions. So thank you to both of you for your presentation. And I think you'll be hearing from us very soon. Thank you, Your Worship. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
On va prendre une autre pause pour redémarrer le système. Le directeur de TI s'en vient.
We have to take another break. Our IT person is here, and so we'll be taking a big break while we settle the issues.
Il a testé une coupe.
Go. Hello, hello, hello. Bonsoir. Bonsoir. Rebonsoir. Ça va?
Good evening. This is the third presentation, which has now become the fourth presentation. So without further ado, we'll give the floor to the presenter. This evening, Dale Abbs from the Canadian firm Watnett and Associates Economists. This group specializes in development charges, which changed the Planning Act in 2017. It involves costs for capital projects. So Daryl and his team have helped many municipalities in Canada to undergo these steps. So tonight we're looking at the policy framework, which we've been working on for the past couple of months. After this evening's presentation, we'll be sharing the document with Council, and you'll be able to provide feedback. We'll come back in December, and then over time we'll come back and we will be passing bylaw on development charges 2026. Daryl and his team helped our neighboring municipality, Moncton. They have a lot of regional experience. They know the area, they know the region, and so it was a fit to hire this. So we're very pleased with the work that's been done so far, but they are the experts. So I will give the floor to Daryl Abbs, and he will be introducing the development charges policy framework to you, the methodology, and the steps to come.
Thank you very much for the introduction. So I have a brief presentation that I will go through, and Marc-Andre will control the presentation and advance the slides. So just to introduce myself, my name is Daryl Abbs, Managing Partner at Watson & Associates Economists Limited, and we've undertaken development charge studies for municipalities across the country. And we are familiar with the area. As mentioned, we did some work for Moncton in introducing and implementing the first development charges bylaw in the province when the new legislation came into force. And we did work with the province at the time to talk about the regulations, which I'll touch on. So next slide, please. And so we'll talk a little bit about development charges, what they are. We'll talk about the what can go into a principles framework, and then talk about some of the potential development charges policies that would be included in a policy framework for the city. And then we'll talk a little bit about some of the feedback we heard from the development community when we met with them in September, and then wrap up with some next steps and answer any questions you may have. Next slide, please. And next slide. And next slide. I'll put up the French version of the slide, and then I'll speak to it in English. And so generally municipalities across the country, and more specifically in New Brunswick, only have a few revenue tools at your disposal to fund growth-related infrastructure. And so what we've observed, especially in New Brunswick, is municipalities spend a lot of their capital budget goes towards asset management or recapitalization or rehabilitation of your existing assets. And so there's not a lot of money to then take and invest into developing and opening up new areas so that development can occur, because we're spending most of the tax funding or the water, the wastewater rate money on your existing assets. And so development charges are one tool that municipalities can use to then finance growth-related infrastructure and take that pressure off the taxpayers or the ratepayers. Next slide, please. And next slide, perfect. So with respect to the legislation under the Community Planning Act prior to 2017, there was Section 45 of this act, which really gave municipalities the ability to recover capital costs related to specific developments. In 2017, the province then introduced a new section to the legislation for development charges. And so in different provinces, so in BC, they have their own development charge legislation, in Ontario, their own development charge legislation. But in certain provinces, it's a subsection of planning acts. And so under your Community Planning Act, you have Division G, which summarizes development charges. And it gives municipalities the ability to pass development charge bylaws to recover the cost of growth-related infrastructure from the new development. So it gives you the authority to pass a bylaw, recover the costs, not just on-site related to the development, but broader infrastructure that benefits multiple developments. It defines what those eligible capital costs are, and it gives you the ability to enter into agreements with the development community if they want to front end some of the infrastructure. And that's in some of the cases in the city of Moncton, we saw that developers were front-ending the infrastructure. They would pay for the infrastructure, and then you would recover the rest, recover the costs from the other development as it proceeds. There's some notice requirements and public consultation requirements as well. And then in 2019, the regulations related to development charges came out. And so actually our firm, when working with the city of Moncton, actually reviewed the draft regulations and worked with the province, provided some feedback on the regulations. And so in the regulations, it really provides that there's some general principles should be set out to apportion the costs equally so that we're treating all development equally. It identifies that the maximum amount of the charge is restricted to only the costs that are eligible to be recovered. You have to consult in good faith with the community. And then council is able to determine the methodology of how you'd calculate the charges and the requirement to include the supporting technical data and analysis, which we would include in a background study. And so as part of this approach, this principles framework, it's kind of the first step in the process to say, you know, if at the end of the day, council approves this framework, we're not approving any development charges per se. What we're approving is the framework with which council can then implement development charge bylaws in the future. Next slide, please. And so there's really two components of when we're thinking about costs related to development. And so there's direct developer responsibility, so the costs that are required to be paid for by the developer normally. So if we think of a typical subdivision, inside that subdivision you have your roads. Those roads would be paid for by the developer themselves. The water mains, the wastewater mains under those roads, the sidewalks, that would all be the developer's cost, and that's what's highlighted there in orange. What then is more of a broader infrastructure, what's included in the blue there, is infrastructure that would benefit multiple developers or multiple areas, which could be recovered through development charges. Next slide, please. And so when we're looking at preparing a framework and how we would potentially implement this, what we want to do is look at your current process and try to mirror that, because we're not really changing anything per se. We're just changing how we're funding the growth related components. And so right now, under your current infrastructure funding approach, you do have those direct developer costs required set out in your subdivision of lands bylaw. Then when we move to more broader infrastructure that benefits multiple landowners, you do use some cost sharing agreements in the cases where maybe it benefits 2 landowners or 3 landowners. Where the growth related works benefit a much broader area, those costs are typically funded by the city. So if it's tax supported service such as roads, it would be paid for with taxes. And if it's water, it would be paid for with water rates, etc. Next slide, please. And so why would a municipality use development charges? There's really a couple reasons why. And so if you have infrastructure costs that benefit multiple developing properties, you could use cost sharing agreements with those developing landowners. But sometimes the developing landowners don't necessarily have a great working relationship. Some cases they do, some cases they don't. Development charge framework would allow you to recover those costs through the city rather than relying on good working relationships with developing landowners. It would also allow for one or more developers to front end the cost, so pay for the cost up front, and then you could recoup the cost from future developing landowners to pay back that initial landowner that paid for the infrastructure. It also allows you a new revenue tool to invest into new growth areas. And one of the things we heard in the city of Moncton was there's some small pockets of developing areas that otherwise wouldn't have been developed, but with the new revenue tool, they were able to finance development of those areas. Next slide, please. And so the legislation identifies what is eligible to be recovered through development charges. And so it's water infrastructure, that's both the pipes and the supply of water, wastewater or sewage, and so that's the collection of the sewage and the treatment of that and disposal, stormwater infrastructure, roads, sidewalks and trails, expanded streets, and new traffic signs and signals, or expanded transit facilities. In addition to these things, we can also recover the costs related to land. So if we needed to, let's say, build water infrastructure, but we needed to purchase land to put that water infrastructure in, we can include the cost of the land as well. Okay. Next slide, please. So how is a development charge calculated? The first thing we need to do is look at the anticipated development in a given area. Okay, so if we take a specific area, we know there's a piece of infrastructure, let's say it's a road, and that road benefits this area. What's the amount of development that's going to occur in that specific area? Once we know what the amount of development is, then we take a look at the capital that's required. So it's a road in this example. And so we look at the total cost of that road. Then we need to deduct some things, because we can't take the total cost of that road and put it on the new development. If there's some excess capacity in that road, if the piece of that road benefits the existing community. So let's say, for example, we're replacing a road with a much wider road. We need to make a deduction because some of that really is asset management works. If we're going to receive any grants, subsidies, or other contributions, we also need to deduct that from the total cost. And so what we're left with is the net costs that are associated with the new development. And then there's a number of different ways in which you can impose the charge or calculate the charge. But we take those net costs and we either divide it by the area of development to have a charge based on, let's say, a hectare, or we can divide it by the amount of development and, let's say, the amount of units and have a charge per unit. Next slide, please. And so now what I'll talk about, so that's generally development charges and some considerations. So based on that, I'll talk about what we've put into the draft framework document that we've put together and as we're working with the city. And so when we look at that hierarchy of cost recovery, it's similar to what you currently do. You would anticipate anything that would normally be a developer cost, as it is today, that would still be a developer cost. But rather than rely on cost sharing arrangements or funding from the city, we would then consider area development charges. Okay, and so we'd utilize that when the infrastructure benefits a broader area and multiple developing landowners. Next slide, please. And sorry, I will add that city-wide development charges, although they could be implemented, were not contemplated yet at this time, but they could be contemplated in the future. If there was infrastructure that benefited the city as a whole, you could look to recover that on all development in the city. But right now, we're just looking at mimicking your existing practice in that if infrastructure benefits a broader area of development, then development charges would apply in that area. And so when we look at by service, how this would work, you'd take water, for example. What we have identified in the orange would be potentially recovered through development charges, and what's in the blue would be recovered as a direct developer cost. They would pay for that themselves as they normally would. So for example, if storage and pumping stations are being constructed to benefit a broader area, we could use development charges for that. If there are linear pipes that are external to development and they're benefiting multiple areas, again, we can take the cost of that pipe and spread it over those areas that benefit. And then what we've done is identified that for each of the different services, what potentially would be considered for an area development charge. Next slide, please. And perfect. So with respect to some of the policy considerations, how the charge would apply, I mentioned you can either impose the charge on an area basis or a per unit basis. And what we find is on a per unit basis is a bit simpler for the development community, especially when undertaking their pro forma analysis to understand if it's going to make sense. Having a per unit charge is beneficial. So looking at charges separate for single and semi-detached homes versus townhomes versus apartments. Any non-residential development that would benefit would pay based on their floor area. So there would be a per square foot or per square meter charge. For any bylaws that would pass, what tends to happen is you pass a bylaw today, and then you'll have that bylaw for a number of years. But as we know, construction costs tend to increase. And so there is a Statistics Canada construction price index, and the charge would index every year with that inflation. Next slide, please. In terms of the timing of collection, so these charges would be imposed and collected at the time of building permit issuance, so prior to building permit issuance. But council would have the ability to enter into agreements with a developing landowner to pay the charge either before or after it would otherwise be payable. So you do have that flexibility in the legislation. If a development charge bylaw was passed, then a reserve fund would be established for that project. And so if you have a road project, then you would establish a reserve fund for that. The development charges you would collect would go into that reserve fund, and it could only be used on the projects for which it was collected. So roads, it would be specific for roads that would benefit the new development. Next slide, please. And so the regulations require meaningful development. And so as part of the policy framework, the principles framework, what we've established is that consultation would be undertaken directly with stakeholders on any potential future development charge bylaws. And we would consult on the calculation of the charge and explain how that works and what the benefiting area is. We then also hold a public hearing to allow the public and council a chance to ask and answer any questions. And then as part of that process, we look to answer those questions and revise any potential development charge bylaw or background study that would be presented. Next slide, please. And so we had an initial meeting with the development community to explain the framework and the broader intent of this process. And so there was 10 representatives from the development community, some in person, some online. And there's some general feedback we heard. And so, you know, that cost of development is already high, that DCs won't assist in providing affordable housing, that they want to ensure development charge revenue is utilized only for new assets and not for existing assets, and that they noted that new development provides additional tax revenues, and that should be factored into the analysis. And generally, I think, you know, this is something we hear across the country, especially now with the cost of development increasing. But what we find is development charges generally, especially in New Brunswick, tend to be rather low. And so, for example, in Moncton, the most recent development charge bylaw that was passed, the charges per apartment were about $1,500. Charge per townhouse was about $3,000. And so it really depends on the infrastructure that's required and the amount of development that requires that infrastructure. It all comes back to, if we have infrastructure required to support growth and development, should that development pay for that infrastructure? With respect to the fact that new development provides additional tax revenues, I agree. New development does provide additional tax revenues, but generally that it tends to pay for itself, right? You have new development, they get new tax revenues, but you also have additional operating costs to accommodate that new development. And so generally what we see is municipalities across the country implementing these types of development charges so that they can fund the infrastructure that's required. Because although you do get additional tax revenue, you have an additional asset that now becomes your liability as well. And so some just general feedback in response to some of those comments that we heard. Next slide, please. And so again, this is just introducing the framework document. Should council proceed and approve the framework document, no development charges would be imposed. A subsequent process would need to be started. a presentation of the background report and the calculations would be provided, would require consultation with the development community, a public hearing, and the presentation of a bylaw for council's consideration. And so from here, what we're looking is to finalize the principles framework in December, bring that forward to council in the first quarter of 2026 for potential adoption of the framework in the first quarter. With that, that concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
First of all, thank you for your patience. Jean-Marc, Councillor Brideau, excuse me.
Merci, Monsieur le Maire.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a question. At the current time, we don't have these development charges or for developers or individuals who want to develop their lands or their property. We don't have these charges currently. Not the way it's written in this draft. However, there are ways for the city to recover costs. We have the bylaw on subdivisions. There are conditions which allow us to recover costs. If the city built a road and put in water and sewage and developers profit from that, we can recover some of those costs, but it's not as set down as the way it is here. Shama, on page 34, a comment which was mentioned to the effect that this project isn't going to encourage developers to build more affordable housing. But at the present time, we have no developers, as far as I know, who are doing any affordable housing developments. So this was an aside that I found a little strange. That's it. Thank you. Councillor Godbout. Thank you, Worship. I'm sorry, her microphone was cutting out.
That we can have around these developmental charges. It's not something that we've talked a lot about necessarily around this table. So I apologize if my questions are fairly, I think, fundamental and not very complicated, but I do want to make sure I understand. So on the eligibility for credits that would be available here if we did have development charges in place, when you put them in place, would you normally see in municipalities that they could offer maybe a credit or a reduction in the development charges based on the type of residential unit? So can you use that as a method for favoring certain developments versus others?
Yes, so through the chair, that is pretty common. You can provide exemptions from the charge, you can provide discounts from the charges, or one of the ways that we've tend to set up the calculations is to have the charges basically stratified based on the type of unit. So single detached units versus townhomes versus apartments, where the charge is actually based on the number of people in those units. And so we get the data from Statistics Canada. There's typically less people in apartments, so their charge is lower, a little bit more people in townhomes, so their charge is a bit higher, and then the single and semi-detached homes tend to pay a higher charge. So you can stratify it based on the number of people in the units, or on top of that, you can have, let's say, exemptions or discounts for affordable housing and things like that.
I kind of distinguish that for myself as one being kind of the eligibility to the credit versus the methods of how you calculate the credit or how much the amount might be. Is that it? You have different ways of doing it. Okay. If you're developing and you're midway through your development and it changes, are there usually in these bylaws or in these development charges an ability to have your development charge revisited at that point? And I say that from a planning perspective, if the city thinks that, development is going to be doing one thing and we engage certain costs, but then halfway through the development charge isn't going to be as much as we thought because their plan changes, what happens, what's the flexibility and how that works out? I don't know if my question is clear here, but I'm just trying to understand from a planning perspective, when things go wrong, how does it go wrong and how do you fix it?
Yeah, so through the chair, what we start out with is the amount of development that's anticipated, right? And we take the cost that associated with the new development divided by the amount of the development. if that amount of development changes, and it's never going to be perfect, right? At the time, we know the infrastructure is needed. Some assumptions are used to determine, the size of the pipe that's required, et cetera. And so you have the ability to update these charges if you want to revisit the bylaw annually or every 2 years or 3 years to make sure that everything's in line. But if we undertake the calculation today, and then let's say less development occurs than we anticipated, there'd be overall a deficit in the reserve fund, which we would then need to figure out how to fund that. So if we need to add some additional tax funding to fund that deficit. If we, at the time of the plans, then development proceeds and there's more development that's there than anticipated, and we don't need any additional infrastructure, then there would potentially be a surplus in the reserve fund for that project, which could then, again, through the policy, we could apply that to future growth-related projects of similar type of service, right? So, for example, if it's a road and we end up with a little bit more money in the reserve fund than we needed, then we can take that money and apply it to the next development charge area that includes a road, for example.
So my last question would be, when you've seen cities implement these types of development charges for the first time, what are some of the growing pains that you see or the obstacles that they run across? And do you have any advice to give us on that?
Sure, through the chair. I think implementing these for the first time, it's more so on the actual implementation, the day-to-day staff, and creating a process so that the development community is aware that when they come in to get their building permit, they need to pay a charge before they get their building permit. And so generally, I think providing as much notice as possible. We're going to you would engage the development community as part of the process, ensure that you provide information to the general public. You would potentially incorporate some language about development charges into the application process for subdivisions. So as developers come in for a new subdivision applications, there can be some language in there that explains that development charges potentially could apply, so that you can essentially get ahead of some of those questions that might occur as developers come forward to pull their building permits.
Merci, Monsieur le Maire. Une dernière question, c'est peut-être plus pour les employés aussi.
Thank you. My last question is for staff. People, these ideas, they've been spoken with the local developers, but I just want to make sure that they've been discussed. It's not a surprise. For example, at the developers meeting, the example of Dieppe Boulevard came up. And so this is the project that got a little boost because of this. So it's not a surprise, especially in around that area. Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you. Councillor Lantang. Thank you, Your Worship. 2 quick questions, easy ones. They're simple too. First of all, this is addressed specifically to developers. Is that right? Yes, because they are going to be building housing. And where exactly are we heading with this? So is it the fact that developers aren't necessarily paying for what they should be today, or is it to better create a framework? A little bit of both, a little bit of both, yes. If I come back to the Dieppe Boulevard example, because we need to acquire some land. We need the infrastructure, but the cost for land and infrastructure, well, now we have something that we can easily calculate. In the past, it might not have been transferred onto the developer, these costs, I mean. For some, yes, but it's been a long time since we had tools with our bylaws. But in this framework, this type of framework, we haven't had this. We must be much more specific here. So there was some interpretation, for the subdivision bylaw, but this is going to make things much more clear. And this policy, is it used in many of the big cities, or is this relatively new? It's relatively new. As far as I know, Moncton is the only city in New Brunswick. I'm not sure if Halifax uses this method. In my discussions with Daryl, I think that it's more used in Ontario and in Western Canada. I don't think they have it in Quebec.
Yeah, so through the chair, they in Halifax for sure. I know that Halifax does have them for their water development charges. In Quebec, I think they are they're not called development charges, but they do have some form of capital charges. These are used in Saskatchewan, they're used in Alberta, they're used in BC, Ontario. And there are a couple other municipalities in New Brunswick that are looking at them as well.
OK. Mon dernier point, c'est ça, c'est que
My last point is this one. Often, to attract investors or businesses or other developments, we need some incentives. And my fear is that if we go ahead with this, and, and I'm not bringing any judgment to this, I'm either coming down on one side or the other of this matter, but are we risking making Dieppe less attractive to developers to come and do major developments, maybe not in subdivisions? Is this a calculated risk? Could it be harmful? Because we've seen the concerns expressed. I'm sure it's the same concerns for all promoters. And so to what extent do we risk slowing down development? That's a good question. I'm talking about risk, but also the opportunity that the city could be a major actor in developing something that would be more difficult to develop. For example, if you have to cross a stream and you need a big pipe or some kind of bridge, developers might not want to get involved in that or invest in all the costs by themselves to put the waterways in or the bridge in. But if we want to install this infrastructure and then see what's happening on the other side, if there are many owners who are going to benefit from it, then the costs are shared. So there's the advantage for some developers. And the city, and it doesn't often happen that it builds new streets. Sure, it happens from time to time. But with the Dieppe Boulevard, once again, to come back to that example, if the city wants to build Dieppe Boulevard, it gets financed. And now the costs, because of the financing, are less costly for those who are benefiting from it around there. So what we're seeing is not that we want to develop and start building streets everywhere. If there's a demand for it, we can look at it. And with this tool, we could consider it much more seriously. I know that you internally you are going to, build streets willy-nilly. My concern is if it was going to harm development and the developers, but that's okay. That's something that we can certainly reflect on. Thank you very much. Thank you. If I may add something, we have another part of the answer. Once we look at the development of new areas, we say that it's not the current citizens who have to take on the expenses. If it's a new development, then those who were previously in Dieppe have already paid for the services and infrastructure building. So in a new development, it's being paid for by the people who will be living there in the future. So that's the principle for this development charge. And sometimes some developers, there are developments that happen, and the first developer has to put in a lot. And the past, some people benefited from that investment. They didn't have to share in those costs. And so from their concerns, there could be some advantages for developers. Now they can be sharing much more fairly because of the numbers that they're going to be developing. And then the bill is shared amongst all stakeholders who are going to benefit from this new infrastructure. So this infrastructure is much more balanced will allow people to pay for what is being, who are going to be using it, and people who are going to be living there. Thank you, Mr. Councillor Gadet. Thank you, Your Worship. I have a question. I don't know if we could put a figure in for the developer. What would it represent approximately? What percentage would it represent? Have that calculation been done yet? We're not there yet. We could put a number. Daryl? Well, Daryl had examples from Moncton per residence. 503,000, I think he said. So it's going to be based on the final bill. So once the infrastructure is in, we know the total amount of the investment, and then you calculate it for development charges. So it's per unit, if it's per acre, the formula is going to determine what the charge is. But at the end, once the investment is all in, and we know the exact figure for the development charge. And then it depends, what do we put in? Are there wetlands? Are there other factors that need to be taken into consideration? That will determine the cost of the infrastructure. So there could be advantages and disadvantages depending on the area. Quite right. But the costs are there for investments that must be done. And I know there's a mention of affordable housing, but the city is considering having an incentive program for affordable housing. So if you have a development charge, but if you're doing development charge, then you're going to have an incentive that you're eligible for. So this is going to balance things out. It's not going to disadvantage those who want to invest in affordable housing. It's a priority for the municipality. So on the one hand, there are investments and there are incentives that are directed toward the priorities of the city. Thank you. That explains things quite a bit better.
The example I used in Moncton, where the townhouse was about $3,000 for the development charge for the townhouse. Just looking at some new builds in Dieppe, there's some row houses for over 300,000. So if the charge was $3,000, represents less than 1% of the house price. Just to give you the order of magnitude.
So I think that helps everybody to understand. Je vois pas d'autres questions.
I don't see any other questions, so.
Rien du tout. Thank you for your patience, number one, and much appreciated.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Bonsoir.
Thank you, Daryl. Merci au conseil. Monsieur le maire.
Alors, la prochaine présentation, on est rendu à l'item 5.
Now we're at item 5, urban growth strategy. We're going to be talking about urban growth strategy here.
Donc, bonsoir, Monsieur le Maire.
Good evening, Your Worship, councillors. I'm with a guest as well. As you can see, Paul Deck. He is Paul is going to be doing the first presentation. The slides will be in French, but Paul will be presenting in English. We had a workshop in March, and we've done a lot of work since then. So Paul will be able to present the work that's been done since that workshop. And he'll be able to talk about what's in the document. And then I have another presentation that will make the connection between this document and the strategic plan. And then the document will be submitted to council at the next meeting for approval. And then it'll be in your hands. So on that note, I will leave Paul, I will give Paul the floor for the first presentation.
And good evening to everyone. I hope everyone can hear me well. Okay. I hope I'm being heard well in the hall, because I know there were some technical difficulties beforehand. So Charles-Éric, whenever you're ready to start the presentation, just go ahead with the slides. Perfect. Okay. I'm not hearing anyone in the room, but I hope you're hearing me well. So today I would like to present to you the summary of the last 1.5 years of work on the urban growth strategy. It was a very considerable project for us, and I think it will be a very, very important document for you going forward. So let's just review quickly what I'll be presenting about. First, I'll just talk a little bit about how to build growth scenarios, what the methodology was behind them, and how we arrived at a recommended growth scenario. Then I will explain how this recommended growth scenario was broken down into fact sheets for each of the 18 sectors of the city. And finally, speak a little bit to the implementation section of the growth strategy. Next slide. So when getting started on projecting growth patterns for the city of Dieppe, of course, first of all, we needed to determine what exactly will population growth likely look like in the future. So our project partners from Turner Drake, who specialized on socioeconomic and demographic data analysis, prepared this growth projection of the population for the city for the next 30 years. Or technically, they started off with at the base of the census 2021, which is the last available census data, and projected from there. And on the table from the bottom, you see not the total population of Dieppe, but rather the increase at each of these census intervals as compared to the base year of 2021. And as you can see here, even in the medium growth scenario, by 2056, if current trends more or less prevail, we see a population growth of 38,950. That's just the growth until 2056. So that with the current population of Dieppe being around 34,500, this already in the medium growth scenario means more than a second Dieppe over the next 30 years. In the high growth scenario, that number is even higher. We would see a growth of over 50,000 additional residents being added to the city. Now that may sound as a lot, but actually when we compare the trends from this base scenario in 2021 to what we're seeing today, the current numbers, the latest available in 2024, are already above the strong growth projections. So therefore, you will see in the growth scenarios, we focused on the mid and the high growth projections because the low one even seems very unlikely at this point. And these are the growth scenarios that we initially prepared based on the medium population growth projection. And of course, the projection or the projected land mass that is to be consumed by the city growth depends very much on the type of growth. So on the left side, we see a more compact growth model that utilizes sample blocks, so existing blocks of development in the city that are of a higher density, often mixed use kind of character. While on the right-hand side, you see a scenario that utilizes sample blocks that are more low density, where they're functionally separate, residential from commercial, and use more of a suburban type of development. So unsurprisingly, this sprawling type of scenario with the same amount of population that being added to the city consumes more area. On the left side, largely the area around Dieppe Boulevard extension is sufficient as for pure greenfield development that is being added to the city, while on the right-hand side, you would need to add areas around Dover Road, for instance, or go further into Greater Lakeburn. Now, for the medium growth, for the high growth population projection, the pattern is very similar. So here we're adding over 50,000 of new residents to the city. So either way, that is quite a significant increase in urban area. However, in the compact version, we drafted a scenario that largely is contained around Dieppe Boulevard, the Dieppe Boulevard extension, a little bit around Dover Road, and a little bit kind of in the segment between Greater Lakeburn and the airport. In the sprawling approach to urban growth, in order to accommodate the same quantity of added residents, you would need to expand into Painsack and Melanson settlement, so really get close to the Trans-Canada Highway in order to absorb that kind of population growth over the next 30 years. So next slide, please. So because we used these sample blocks from the city, and this will look familiar to you if you attended the workshop on urban growth that we had with some heads of departments and council in March. Since we used these sample blocks, we were able to create a growth model that readily prepares all kinds of numbers and statistics that are related to these different growth scenarios. And so the first two columns here relate to the medium population growth projections. The two on the right relate to the high population growth projections. And in each case, clearly there is more land area that is being consumed by urban growth. So in the sprawling scenario, for the medium population projection, it's an added 231 hectares. While for the high population projection, it would be an added 360 hectares that are being consumed in the sprawling growth scenario. Now, the model also delivers on some data about presumable land assessments and tax revenues. And you can actually see that for the sprawling scenario, the tax revenues are slightly higher than in the compact version because, of course, as we have larger properties, potentially larger homes, the per capita kind of tax burden is typically higher in those cases. However, for the city, that's not necessarily a good deal because if you only consider one type of cost, which is the lengths of roads that are being added to the system, only that one type of cost already very much changes the overall calculation and the financial image of these types of growth. So we just heard a presentation about development charges, which mostly focus on a one-time financial contribution to create new municipal infrastructure. However, once that infrastructure is created, the municipality is also indefinitely responsible to maintain these assets, and also at the end of their lifespan, they need to be replaced. So when we considered those costs in the model for just the added kilometers to the road network already show that the compact growth scenarios save over the course of 30 years several $1 million to the city. Now, that is really only just one type of cost that is easy to calculate because the road maintenance costs are available in municipal budgets. But this doesn't, for instance, consider other costs such as the maintenance of the water and sewer networks. It doesn't include cost for transit being more spread out and more difficult to service and more expensive, fire protection covering a larger area. All these kind of costs, garbage collection, are not even considered in here. And of course, what's also not considered is the cost to the individual, for instance, for having to own an extra car in the household because the areas aren't walkable and those kind of things. So we presented these numbers at the workshop back in March. And on the next slide, we can review that, not only did we present these costs, and the costs are one consideration in this overall framework. But what's also important is the values of the community in the overall context. And about 1 year ago exactly, we were running the public engagement on the urban growth strategy with some in-person events in City Hall as well. And the 5 main principles that we identified from conversations with the public were those of balanced growth, meaning to growth in a manner that, yes, accepts additional residents, but also maintains the quality of life for everyone. A type of growth that provides for diversity of housing options, a type of growth that diversifies and increases the options for transportation in the city, that makes prudent use of natural assets and protects those as far as possible, and to have a community that has a vibrant community life with a lot of culture, with a lot of opportunity for people to gather. So those guiding principles were also taken into account when we were presenting those draft growth scenarios at the workshop. And on the next slide, you can see some pictures from that workshop when we all got together back in March to start off with a little crafting exercise where you all had the opportunity of gaining some experience by spreading out some of the population growth on a map using our sample blocks. And then following that, you were giving us feedback by scoring the various growth scenarios against those guiding principles that I've just presented. And as a result of that whole exercise, we've taken your feedback, and on the next slide, you can see the final recommended growth scenario that we have arrived at. What we really considered here, we saw that in that workshop, you scored the compact scenarios higher on mobility options, on balanced growth, and also on community life. You expected better outcomes. You have given us some feedback that we should consider a wider range of housing options. So not only go medium to high density, but also in terms of diversity of housing options, consider some lower density development as well. And what also went into this final map was some added knowledge and conversations with staff going back and forth that informed us about some developments that were approved in the meantime and had to be considered in that model as well, which shrank the overall footprint a little farther. And so we arrived at this final recommended growth scenario, which shows in blue residential densities and potential to add them into specific areas. Red areas of the map show commercial development, and where they both overlap in mixed use areas, you see a purple color on the map. And this model is based also on detailed sample blocks, but we chose this visualization that shows this a bit more as a heat map, where it's not necessarily pointing to individual properties, but still clearly showing the vision for where Dieppe can grow and how much area is needed in order to accommodate the population growth by 2056. Next slide. Now this map as a whole, with the entire growth scenario, is by itself a good first step for an overview, but it is not very helpful for day-to-day operations, for decisions about individual plans or individual rezonings and so on. So in order to give staff a tool that they could use on a daily basis when working with the growth strategy, we have divided the city. The city was already divided into these 18 sectors that various cities departments have been working with. But we have broken down the growth strategy, the growth strategies recommended growth scenarios into these 18 sectors. And for each of them, based on the GIS data that are behind the recommended growth scenario, we broke it down to population targets, density targets, commercial density targets, percentage of land that is recommended to be owned by the municipality to provide it for the public good. Also some transportation targets, and as soon as the forestation plan for the city is complete, the tree cover targets will also be included in these fact sheets. And on the next slide, you can see that some of the sectors of the city that expect particularly strong growth pressures, accommodation of a lot of added density. For those, we have broken down the area even further and marked opportunity areas on the map for which we recommend certain development policies that in future planning documents should be included in order to guide the development in the area. And finally, the last slides will give you an overview of the implementation section of the growth strategy. So all these growth areas that are showing on the recommended growth scenario, they all have naturally infrastructure implications. So our project partners from Englobe have done some high-level engineering analysis to come up with recommendations for water, wastewater, and stormwater systems, and also for the transportation network on what would be the main high-level projects in order to adapt the city's infrastructure plan to the targets of the growth strategy. And more so on a policy level on the next slide, we see the main projects that the strategy recommends in order to implement the principles of the recommended growth scenario. Of course, on top of all of that will be a soon upcoming review of the planning documents of the city. So the municipal development plan and zoning bylaw will have to be at some point reviewed to make sure that the zoning permits for the development to happen in a manner that is consistent with the growth strategy. Also, to look at a stronger integration of transportation and land uses, some regard to the latest transit plan to make sure that those areas along transit lines are appropriately upzoned, and so on. So those will be all very vital projects for the city. Also, what's really important and what came out strongly in the public engagement on this project is that growth, yes, it's something that's welcome if it looks good, if the urban form is maintained in a way that those are high quality, eye-pleasing, nice urban environments. So there are several urban design related studies that the growth strategy recommends, specifically to look at certain corridors and their urban design characteristics, as well as the creation of a committee dedicated to creating public spaces. There are some recommendations that affect other planning documents of the city or planning related documents of the city, such as the management of green spaces, policies related to transportation in general, fire protection, and we just heard the presentation about development charges. Those are also an important tool to steer growth in the right way, as well as an update of the water and sewer master plans, which is still due, and I think partially already in the works. So that concludes the overview. Thank you for your attention, and Charles-Éric and I will be open to questions.
Je ne sais pas si ce serait mieux que je fasse ma présentation avant de passer aux questions.
Maybe I should do my presentation before we go to questions there.
Voilà, donc maintenant que Paul a fait un peu l'introduction
Right,
sur
so now that Paul has introduced what's in the growth strategy, I'm going to be talking about the link that we can do between that document and the strategy plan and the importance that it has for the municipality. So the growth that we've been talking about, these are big figures. They're likely figures, probable figures. We don't know if it's going to take until 2056 to reach these numbers, but we want to be ready. So that's the idea here. So for the planning department, what does the growth strategy mean? We are covered by the Community Planning Act. We're covered by the bylaws, pardon, and the growth strategy is a document that's not legislative in nature, but it's information that we can use. So to start reviewing the municipal plan for 2027, the growth strategy is not something that will change things overnight, but it'll allow us to have a tool for decision making. It will guide us when we come to review the municipal plan. In terms of the municipality, the strategy plane is a link between the urban growth strategy and the various municipal master plans. So it helps us to plan and distribute growth throughout the municipality. It can it help us with various master plans. We can think, okay, this is the growth that we can expect to see. So it allows us to have it's a decision-making tool to help us project ourselves into the future. And we're talking a long-term plan, 2056. So it'll allow us to ensure consistency as well between the various master plans in light of projected growth. Now, in terms of the issues that have been identified in the strategic plan, we're talking about the offer and demand in terms of housing, wetlands, and the pressure, the ability of systems to and active transportation. So the urban growth strategy was identified as something that the city wanted to commit to. So in concrete terms, so under objective 1.2.1 of the strategic plan's action plan, one of the targets is to have completed the urban growth strategy by the end of 2025. So we're at the end of 2025, and so the urban growth strategy supports the strategic plan's strategy. So there's where there's a link with promoting the economic and territorial development of the municipality, guiding densification and mixed-use development in targeted areas of the territory, enhancing green spaces and natural environments. In terms of a dynamic, accessible, and inclusive Dieppe, we can see a link with meeting the needs of the community by offering a variety of housing options in high-quality living environments, developing sustainable mobility infrastructure and services, and continuing to develop the city center and exploit its potential. And in turn, under Dieppe efficient and committed city, ensuring the city's internal organizational capacity and promoting continuous improvement, change management, and efficient resource management. So there are lots of links or connections that are in line with the strategic plan. So by identifying anticipated population, housing and employment growth, and the spatial distribution within the municipality, the urban growth strategy makes it possible to identify sectors with strong future growth potential, in order to anticipate potential dynamics that could develop in the region. So along Dieppe Boulevard, we might think, okay, so we might have to look at increasing bus frequency on that line. If we think that the industrial park is going to develop in such and such a way, it'll help us anticipate the traffic that'll be headed in that direction. So it shows us how the different aspects of the impacts on the territory. It allows us to set targets over a 30-year horizon. So for example, if we talk about transit coverage, it allows us to, it's like a northern star and helps to guide us in our planning. And based on it allows us to plan based on the various characteristics of each sector as well. So what's needed in the downtown area may not be what applies to Greater Lakeburn. The context is different. So we have targets that are adapted to each sector. It also allows us to forecast the different potentials of sectors identified within the municipality. So here in this sector, what we see is, so north of Champlain Street, there's a low residential area, so there won't be a lot of change. The wetlands. So it gives us a broad overview of that sector and guides us with respect to what we need for each sector. It allows us to respect the existing built environment, to implement a high quality urban design, and to be respectful in the development transitions. So these changes don't necessarily mean zoning changes. By approving the strategic growth plan, it doesn't oblige us to make changes. These are, it's not an automatic, it doesn't say that we have to necessarily accept changes. So it also allows us to adopt a sound urban perimeter management. It allows us, by understanding what sectors are able to accommodate this growth, we can plan better. It allows us to understand the future needs generated by growth. So, for example, as I said, if we see that there's going to be more growth in the Boulevard Dieppe sector, Dieppe Boulevard sector, pardon, it allows us to guide the updating of master plans, as I mentioned, by the various departments by presenting the growth prospects of the different sectors of the city. It allows us to establish a vision and priorities for the revision of the municipal development plan. As Paul mentioned, there are recommendations in terms of different development policies. So in some areas, we might want to do further studies. And it also allows us to identify areas that may require further consideration or more specific studies. So, for example, one of the examples in the document deals with the Amiro Street. We see it's a major artery. There's a certain densification pressure there, but Amiro Street has, we want to be able to develop respectfully in that area. So the document gives us an overview of the characteristics of each area and how we can look at densifying in that area while respecting the characteristics. With regard to the extension of Dieppe Boulevard, the urban growth strategy provides a clear understanding of future residential and commercial space needs and how to distribute them throughout the municipality. And it also allows us to take a thoughtful and responsible approach to opening up the territory. And then we can look at what we need in terms of density or expanding the perimeter of the city. It allows us to understand what we need to see in each area if we use that model. So basically, the strategy, again, it's not a legally binding document, but it allows us to project the municipality into the future by anticipating future dynamics in the territory, to establish a connection between the strategic plan, the upcoming revision of the municipal land use plan, and future revisions of master plans. It's based on statistical analysis and demographic forecasts, as well as consultation with the public, council, the workshop that we had, and various municipal departments. It divides the municipality into sectors, 18 sectors, to facilitate monitoring through performance indicators and development areas. And it enables the establishment of an informed vision for the secondary plan concerning the extension of Dieppe Boulevard and other potential future secondary plans. And it gives us recommendations for future land use planning as well. So if we think of, and again, if we approve the plan, it doesn't mean that we're going to implement everything, but it allows us to study these things and to consider gentle densification, the development of collector streets, and so forth. And it allows us as well to pay attention to qualitative aspects as well. So now we're at questions. Questions from councillors. Councillor Janet. Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you very much for the presentation. Here's my question. I have a question about key indicators. I see a willingness to make a connection with the other municipal plans and documents. But in terms of natural areas, I don't know if there's a connection to be made in the key indicators. Perhaps a percentage. Is there a percentage in the strategy that focuses on protected areas and natural areas, for example? Well, that's something that could be added. We don't see it here, but in terms of forest cover, there is a study that's currently underway. So we thought it was more up to that study to establish targets, and that's for a 10-year period. Here we're talking about 30 periods. We thought it might create confusion. So
le couvert forestier actuel dans les différents secteurs.
You know, we describe what the current forestry cover is. Another thing that's important is that this is a living document. So if there's a green and a green spaces and parks document, we could use the same sectors to establish targets, and that information could be added to the strategy, to the growth strategy. So this is a basic document, but the other master plans, if you will, could go and get information from the strategy plan. And then if they have targets in terms of green spaces, they could be added to those documents as well.
If you were to look, and I hope I have the right figures, but the Canadian side is to conserve 30% of spaces. So I don't remember if we had established whether it was a protection target or if that's coming. But I imagine that by establishing this target, it's going to necessarily have an impact on urban growth strategy, because the strategy won't move ahead in the same way. If we say we have to conserve a certain number of green spaces, so the growth won't happen in the same way. Well, with regard to that, it's reflected in the files for sector 17 and 18. There was CCNB9 that has started looking at the various ecological corridors and the extension of Dieppe Boulevard, and sector 18, which is below Amiro and Dover roads. So we already had this information, and we see it being reflected in the information about those sectors. It's more in the other presentation, I think. I can give you a, let me see if I can adjust that.
Par exemple, ici, on peut voir.
So for example, here, you can see the green here, which corresponds to a notion of conservation, which is already taken into account for these areas. And once again, this study is in sectors 17 and 18. But after that, I don't want to speak for other services, but this might be done for all of the municipality. So it's something that could be added to the information which we already have in the urban growth strategy. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Godbout. Thank you, Your Worship. There's a lot of information here. Thank you. We'll try and assimilate some of that this evening. When I look at the document, I have a comment first. I would have liked to see this reflected in the document. We mention it many times here in our growth strategy to ensure that we have the right transition between sectors. I don't see this reflected in this document. I'm sure you've taken into consideration some, but once I read the document, I don't see it. And I think it's something that we could improve for communication to say whether there is really how we transition from one sector to another when other things are involved. It would be clearer and should be a factor taken into consideration that I think people would like to see this and understand that it's been taken into consideration. I know you've taken into consideration, but citizens may not understand that, and we should ensure that they are able to find that in the growth plan. It's an opinion of mine, but I think we said this often around the table that transitions between things are important. It's not always something that we've done well in the past that we should do better in the future. When I read the document, I'm trying to think about something as I'm reading this document and how does it change life in Dieppe? I'm trying to humanize this document. I'm looking at it with a human perspective. How is it changing people's quality of life, the daily life of people? What will people's life looks like when we have a growth strategy like this? I may not need an answer this evening, but once we present it and pass it, I think it might be useful to have a discussion to say what kind of city it's going to give us. What can this strategy, growth strategy, make the city look like? And think for most ordinary people, an urban growth strategy doesn't tell them much. But what it looks like in our own lives with a growth plan like this, these are the elements that they will want to hear. And I think it would be useful for us to hear the vision of our urban planners. I know you're working very hard to ensure that we have an interesting quality of life and a good quality of life in Dieppe. But this doesn't come out of the document. That's okay, it's a growth plan. But when you communicate it to us, I'd be interested to know how you think it changes life in Dieppe and how it allows us to maintain things and what do we have to evolve? How are we going to live through this growth? Yes, Alexandre. I'm always interested to hear what you think about it. Yes. It's certainly going to change the way we perceive and how we work with our developers and how we develop. It's a way of thinking about things. So I'll let the experts talk about this. It's an excellent question. And I think the opportunity presents itself. It's a visionary document, as we mentioned earlier. It's a document which is in line with the strategic plan, but has a direct link to all the other master plans in the municipality. It's in the execution of the other master plans that we'll see how things become more specific and how operationally speaking or administratively speaking, we have discussions, or we can have more discussions about how the various municipal services should be looking at and making this document come alive in the medium and long terms. What changes do we have to do in order to realize the vision which is established with the urban growth strategy? I think I've talked about this with my colleagues very often, and I presented this to council. There was a substantial change within the municipality in the last 50, 25 years. So what's happening with the municipality is that it's becoming more urban. The urban component can be examined in various optics. You can see it in New York and Paris. We're not there yet, but we're in an urban context where the municipality, with its urban growth strategy, makes us think that we should be looking at qualitative aspects of the built assets. When we talk about this, we talk about urban design. So how do the buildings have a relationship with the pedestrian? When we walk in the city center, do we have a feeling of belonging? Do we have a feeling of wanting to live, play within this built space? So the strategy is going to play an important role in providing these ways of recommending things as has been mentioned. So the work is not done. There are elements and there are studies that need to be undertaken and finished. The study of the urban design, corridor design. We talked about Amiro, but Chartersville is an example of a corridor, which is, so does it have the capacity to densify in some of the sectors of Chartersville Road? Maybe not all, but maybe there are some key areas, and it's through these studies that we will be able to determine various means of solution. The question of use is an important one because often we have an idea, or you hear of an idea, that we need to physically move ourselves in a car to go from the home if you want to go buy a loaf of bread or get a carton of milk. But the urban growth strategy has identified or will identify some areas of the municipality where we should be introducing local businesses, local service businesses, so we can start minimizing these trips and have complete neighborhoods. You often hear about the 50-minute walking cities. This strategy aligns with attempting to make our neighborhoods more dynamic by respecting the key elements that make these communities what they are as neighborhoods. So it's being presented to you as a long-term document. This document provides information for population growth, but the work is going to be done with master plans from each service that are going to align with the growth projected within this strategy. I think you've touched on some of the things that we have inside the community. Is that we're trying to do this with growth, but we also know it has an impact on the traditions we had in the past, the ways of living, the ways of doing things. I always give the example of people when we talked at this council about the amendments to do outdoor fires, and one of the comments, in order to have outdoor fires in winter and summer, it's not way of, you could do a small fire in the back of your house previously, but in an urban growth strategy like this idea is evolving and should evolve because all of a sudden it loses its place or its starting point as a way of thinking about things. It's a way of moving away from how we live in Dieppe, and we're asking our residents to become involved and to have confidence that we can also build quite a similar quality of life by looking at urbanization. But I think we've used this example in order to see people, to have people see what this vision brings to them. I'm looking at things positively, and we had enough discussions to be able to visualize where this is going to bring us. But we have to bring the citizens along with us. It's difficult for them to see it through a document like this. So we have some communication work to do as we move along in studying this urban growth strategy, and it's a great document. We have a lot that we can do with it. Thank you. Councillor Turgeon-Roy. Thank you, Your Worship. I was going to say a few of the things that you have already said, but Alexandre, we often talk about the needs of the municipality, but we don't put the citizen in first place. So we make these things very technical. And I myself as a resident, but as an elected representative too, sometimes it's difficult for me because we're not there in the day-to-day work. I think it's going to take a communication strategy, a public relations strategy, just to explain this on the radio in the morning to our citizens. We live in the past in a certain way. They have an image of what Dieppe looked like, how it would look like 10 years ago, for example, but we cannot, the figures prove that we're not there anymore. We're moving towards something else. And so I think that this communications exercise, so thank you very much for this explanation. Thank you. I must say that I need to take the floor and not to go on and on for 45 minutes, but I'm going to try and shorten this. I'm very proud of the work done by those who have preceded us. When I look at the city of Dieppe, I can guarantee you that there are many people throughout New Brunswick, specifically, but even further away than that, who, and this is one of the reasons why our success means that you either move forward or you die. It's as simple as that. And there are examples everywhere throughout New Brunswick and also everywhere throughout our country where people lost their chance to continue to move forward as a community, because it's a community. We're not just talking about brick and mortar. We're talking about people. And had we not acted the way we did over the past 10 or 12 years and done what we are doing, we wouldn't have the opportunity to do even better. And I think that it's what affects us the most or touches us the most in the work, because it's not just bricks and mortar. I'm talking about our heart.
De ne pas agir
We cannot act in a structural way just to say, look, this isn't how we did it in the past. That doesn't let us move forward. We have to think of our best practices and to see how we can continue to improve our community for the future. I always use the word community because it's a more humane or human way of expressing it. But for myself, as you know, I won't be here in a couple of months, but I'll be keeping an eye, a very interested eye on this file very specifically, because as I've said, if we don't move forward, or if you're backing up, then you're not looking where you're going, you're going to fall.
No, I don't often speak up, but we have an opportunity here, several opportunities in front of us. And I thank you for the work that you're doing right now. It's so important, and it's exactly what we need. So don't forget that. And I hope that municipal council, the next council that we get, will be smart enough to know what we're leaving them. Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Have a nice evening, everyone. Oh, there's another item. I know you want to end the meeting, but there's another item. Anything? Councillor Janet? No? Councillor Brideau? Councillor Thibodeau? 30 seconds? Okay, I don't believe her, but we'll give her the floor. I'm going to time you. The next CRPA meeting is November 27th. Is that it? All right, thank you to the consultants.
But you're dead. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
All right, good night.
Déjà passé. Déjà fait devant l'année passée.
Oh, ben, ça, c'est des vieilles nouvelles, là.
Il y avait des gens qui étaient absents. Il y avait des gens qui étaient absents.
Il y avait du monde qui était malade.
C'est ça, ils ont beaucoup de sièges vides.
Beaucoup de sièges vides dans l'opposition, ouais. Mais ça, tu sais, qu'il y ait beaucoup de personnes qui ne sont pas là de l'opposition, ça augure mal pour Tipu, là. C'est fini. C'est fini, lui, là. Ah, il est fini, lui, là. S'il y avait beaucoup de personnes qui n'étaient pas là, le conservateur